Ahoy and welcome. This is Admiral. You probably know what two swords means when it comes to campaign difficulty, imprecise as that metric can be, but you'd probably be hard-pressed to give a precise and accurate explanation of what these two swords mean on the endgame timeline. So let's talk about battle events, those widely misunderstood markers that have a reputation of corresponding pretty loosely to the actual battles you fight in a given game. If you give yourself 1,000 Mangudai in the scenario editor and use them to destroy 100 Teutonic Knights, that strangely may or may not register as a battle event, despite the massive armies and crushing defeat you've inflicted. So let's break down what triggers them, as far as we can tell, and see if we can uncover a method to the madness. We'll start by noting that a battle marker on your color is a good thing, a very practical combat milestone that you've achieved, rather than something more neutral or arbitrary like a certain number of units engaged in a fight. In the original game and up through HD, this was marked with an axe, but in Definitive Edition was changed to crossed swords, although the trigger mechanic seems to have remained the same. First off, let's talk about what battle events are not. As far as I can tell, they have nothing to do with the number of units on either side, and strangely seem to only have a loose relationship with the number of units that die. They also have nothing to do with score, age or technology status, number of players, or map size. And yet the way they are defined seems pretty interesting, and even fairly reasonable if you consider them as something you achieved with the army you had at a given time. Before I divulge the secret, I have to give a lot of credit to a retired Redditor who was nice enough to lay out the basics for us 8 years ago, in what is certainly one of the best kept secrets of the game, despite being publicly visible. It's like when some long-lost artifact randomly gets found somewhere in an old library. We'll see how his observations have held up, and I'll be adding to them to demystify some of the seeming randomness of how these achievements are awarded. So according to him, a battle event is registered if within a discrete 30-second time slot, you kill enough enemy units and or buildings to be worth 15% or more of the total value of all your own units and buildings, with the exception of castles. And as I've found, wonders as well. And with destroyed buildings being valued doubly. And this is true as far as I can tell, and even holds up if you accumulate that level of kill value from fighting multiple opponents, or if you manipulate the value of units such that few kills are necessary to achieve a very high resource kill value. Going forward, I'll sometimes refer to this as the KO value, the ratio of kill value to owned value. But this is a pretty interesting metric that becomes more demanding as your empire grows, yet at any point in which you achieve it, represents a notable infliction of destruction upon your enemy or enemies. For example, let's say we're in Feudal Age with this base and these units, and up here on the top right is the total value of our units and buildings. If we add those two together, that represents the O, or owned value in the earlier equation. To find the K, the minimum kill value of enemy units we'd have to kill within a 30-second slot to trigger a battle event, we multiply that by the established value of 0.15. So in this case, killing 410 or more resources worth of enemy units will do the trick. If we take them out within a single 30-second slot, we get a battle marker. If we repeat the test with the same number of kills, but split between two 30-second time intervals, we don't trigger a battle event. The same is true if we had killed the same number of lower valued units. For example, if the enemy had discounted Magyar scouts with a total value of 408 resources, we would end up just short of the KO value of 15% required to trigger a battle event. Or if we had more units or buildings, such that killing 6 scouts would be less than 15% of the value of all our units and buildings. We could also trigger a battle event by destroying 205 resources worth of buildings, remembering that they're valued doubly, or some combination of buildings and units. In the later stages of the game, when we have more units and buildings, a much larger battle, as defined by value destroyed relative to value owned, is required to register as a battle event. In Imperial Age, with this army and this base, this is the total value of our units and buildings, meaning we have to destroy this value of enemy units, half that value of enemy buildings, or some combination of both, in order to earn a battle marker. To return to the first example of 1,000 Mangudai versus 100 Teutonic Knights, the Mangudai player can never achieve a battle marker for himself unless you manipulate the value of units, but the Teutonic Knight player can if he kills 15 or more Mangudai, corresponding to a 15% or greater KO value. Now let's talk about why the allocation of battle event markers seems so random given the precision of its conditions. One element of this is obviously the short and discrete time period in which the damage has to be dealt. You could have killed twice as many enemy scouts, but if those kills were spread out enough over the course of 3 different time slots, which could be as little as a minute and 1 second, no single one of those slots would have reached the kill value threshold to register as a battle event. You'll remember the significant damage you dealt in a fairly short time, but nobody ever has a reason to keep track of the 30-second time intervals with a view to maximize kills within them. The next thing you'll notice is that the marker is always offset from the actual battle, and it never appears sooner than 1 minute after the end of the slot in which the battle event trigger actually occurred. You could argue that this is a minor bug, and I'm not entirely sure of the reasoning behind it, other than noting that there is some post-processing of the data before the event is recorded. For example, if the game ends less than a full minute after the end of the battle event time slot, it won't be recorded. So if the kills happen from 15:30 to 16 minutes, the end screen battle marker will show up at around 17 minutes. But what if you have a series of unbroken time slots which all qualify for a battle marker? In that case, the whole stretch is considered as a single event, and the marker appears on the screen 1 minute after the last qualifying time interval. So if you have 10 30-second segments that all qualify as battle events together from 15 minutes to 20 minutes in game time, the battle marker will appear on the end screen at 21 minutes. Which should help explain why battle event markers sometimes appear much later than the conflicts that triggered them. And if there's a 30-second or longer time slot where the threshold is not met, even if the conflict is still ongoing, that is the end of the battle event. But if in the next 30 seconds after the end of the lull, you hit the threshold again, it will register as another battle event. The final question is how the game decides to display these battle events when there are more qualifying battles than displayable markers. There seems to be a limit of 3 battle markers per player per game, so how does the game choose which ones to display? After some testing, here's the hierarchy. The first battle event triggered by a player always seems to be recorded on the end screen, regardless of the scale or amount of any later battle events. If there are more than 3 battle events that are all considered equal, then the first 3 are chosen, although in practice battles will never be exactly equal. After the first battle, the other 2 that are displayed are those with the highest total KO value. This could be a massive amount of enemies killed within one time slot, or more likely, the cumulative value of enemies killed in a sequence of unbroken qualifying time slots, which you'll recall is treated as a single battle event. This here might be the best visual depiction I can give, where a single condottiero is enough to trigger a battle event. Because it's the first battle event triggered, it will show up on the end screen, even if all subsequent battles are larger.
Yes, well, some of them are quite a bit bigger than last year.
I don't care how big they are!
The other 2 that show up on the end screen will represent the 2 greatest single time slots, or unbroken chain slots, with the greatest ratio of kill value relative to my own unit and building values, or KO value. So as far as I can tell, that's how battle events are determined and ranked in AoE 2. And while the time intervals can make it somewhat arbitrary, I think that destroying a certain value of enemies with a given value of your own units is an interesting and reasonably scaling benchmark for awarding a battle marker. To summarize our findings, a battle event is tentatively recorded if, within a given 30-second time slot, you destroy enemy units or buildings worth 15% or more of the total value of your own units and buildings, barring castles and wonders. If there are more than 3 candidates in the course of a game, the ones that appear on the end screen are the first time the threshold is crossed, and the 2 greatest battles as defined by the highest KO values. The markers are offset by 1 minute from the actual event, and in the case of extended, unbroken battle sequences, those are marked 1 minute after the end of the last qualifying time segment. It's possible that there are exceptional cases I haven't accounted for, or other goings-on behind the game code's fog of war, and if you find anything extraordinary, you can let me know. But everything I've told you here should be repeatable and seems likely to account for most or all of the circumstances you'll encounter in a normal game. And if anything further is discovered, we can add that to the books. So by now you should have a pretty good idea of what a battle event is, and why they often show up later than the actual conflicts, or why they don't register if split across time segments. I put some further information in the comments if you're interested, as well as some recommendations for the easiest ways to test this yourself. I hope you found this interesting, and thanks for watching. This has been me explaining the esoteric eccentricities of how extraordinarily effective engagements are entered on the end screen. Till next time.